Hello and welcome to the Next Power Impressions of Thea the Awakening. This is by Muha Games and we covered it a little while back on our Next Week in Gaming for when it was going to release. And basically I've been playing it for quite a very long time. This is probably the longest I've actually played a sort of turn-based strategy game in such sort of short notice sort of thing. So basically this is... it's quite difficult to pin it down to one specific genre, but it's essentially a turn-based strategy game that is roguelike. So the purpose of this is to lose quite frequently in order to start again and have more stuff unlocked. But it also has a few hints of computer card game mechanics, particularly when it comes to combat and the way that a lot of the in-game solutions to things is through this card thing, and it's not necessarily through combat, but it's sort of through a test of your various little characters' skills and unique stats and talents and things like that. So it's pretty difficult to get into initially. I played the tutorial, and to be perfectly honest, when I started playing the tutorial, I found it a little bit difficult to get my head around the card game. I think I still find it a little bit difficult to get my head around the card game at the moment, but I'm getting there. I think I've played it for 9 hours now over the space of 2 days, so we'll probably have about 20 hours clocked by the end of the full review. And so far I have played 5, if not 6 full sort of rounds, full match sort of things. And the first one took about 4 hours because I was learning how to play the game and I was bumbling around, didn't really know what I was focusing on doing. And then I realized that this game can actually be played with a focus on something. So at the start of it, you've probably seen the screens at the start of this video. You can choose your main sort of god, your hero sort of guy, and that person defines some sort of passive talents you might have, and these passive talents will sometimes give you attribute bonuses, sometimes make you increase XP gain or increase the rate at which you research new technologies. Sort of simplistic stuff that form like a little basis, a little foundation for your game, which is quite cool. And the purpose of playing it as a roguelike and then playing and playing and playing new games and new games is that your main god that you choose will level up. You'll gain experience based on how many turns you last, how many quests you complete, how many recipes you unlock, how many what the most awesome unique item you've crafted is, and you'll get XP based on your performance through the last game. That XP will be applied to the god you chose to be, and that god will level up. And I think there's 5 or 6 levels for each god, and they provide different passive bonuses as if you choose them for your next game. Now, there's only 2 unlocked at the start, and some of them are unlocked by completing campaigns. Not campaigns, main quest lines. Some of them are completed by getting a god to a certain level. So the first hero you unlock will be one you gain by getting any old god to level 3. And one of them is unlocked by completing the tree quest, I think, and one of the gods is unlocked by unlocking all of the rest of the gods. So there's plenty of gods for you to unlock as a sort of basis around the game, reason for you to keep playing, as well as, you know, a lot of reasoning to keep playing to level them up as well, to, you know, get all these crazy passive bonuses. Now the game is pretty deep. I think I jumped in thinking, oh, this is going to be a relatively plain, quite limited 4x game, but I was very wrong, as a matter of fact. And this is very deep. Like this goes far beyond, I believe, what Civ does. The only negative I have so far is that you can't build other cities. You only have one village. You can make these little expeditions, so you can split off people from your village as an expedition, and then they can make camp, but they can't physically build anything while they're, well, when they've made a camp or whatever, which is a little bit annoying. That was the first thing that irritated me slightly. The card thing is a little bit more complex than I realised. You'll have lots of different stats on your cards, as well as you don't just have damage, you have health, and then you have shield, which when the card is played, you'll get an additional shield to your health. But if you play the card as a tactical card, you get their equivalent shield as additional health, and cards will have initiative based on whether they'll play their actions sooner or later, but all cards are played from left to right. It's actually quite complicated, and I think even after 9 hours of playing, I'm still not 100% sure if I really fully understand it yet. At this stage, I have played for 9 hours. I've played lots and lots and lots of those card-based events, and to be brutally honest, I haven't really enjoyed it as much as is necessary to do them, and so I've been using the auto resolve button for, I'd say, a good 90% of what I've been doing in terms of combat and quests and stuff like that. I've just been using this auto resolve because, as interesting as the card game thing is, it's not really clicking with me at the moment, and I still don't fully understand it. And to be honest, the tutorial sort of helps, but it really doesn't. The tutorial is basically, it shows you how to do 1 or 2 basic things like your village management, like gathering, crafting, and building and stuff like that. But beyond the basics and how to complete quests, it doesn't really go. It goes into a lot of brief detail, if you understand what I'm saying. It has like 23 little pop-up messages while you're playing the game, except it doesn't do them while you're playing it. It just says, hey, read these 23 messages and then have at it. And I did that, and I won because it was against an easy enemy. But yeah, it's not. This card thing is a lot more complicated than it looks, and I think it's going to take some getting used to. And I'm not 100% sure if I like it as a mechanic at the moment or not. But that's just one little thing. In this game, you can expand your village. The map is massive, like seriously massive. In order to get resources, obviously because you can't move your village or expand your village, and your expeditions can't build anything, what you have to do is your starting village will always have 2 resources, wood and food. Wood is needed to heal over time, and food is needed to, well, survive, eat, not die of hunger, because you can die of hunger. And so sometimes your starting village might have more than 1 resource. I remember one of my starting villages, I think, had 4. I think if I'm lucky enough, you could eventually get tiles which have double resources on them. And so obviously you can't. You might be able to research different craftable items like improved gathering, improved crafting, making different armors, making different weapons, making different buildings which provide passive bonuses, or help more people to come into your village. And a lot of those things can't be done without certain resources. And in order to get those resources, the game forces you, which I think is a great idea, it forces you to create an expedition, or maybe even a couple of expeditions, mix them up with maybe a couple of soldiers, but also some gatherers, importantly, so that you can go to an area, set up camp, gather loads of stuff around that area, fill up your resources until you're almost unable to move, and then shift that all the way back to your main village so you can craft some of these awesome things. And I say I never really managed to do that until probably about 6 hours into the game. It's a very long time to spend on a game, but I was quite cautious because it's actually surprisingly challenging. At the moment, I'm playing all just standard normal level at the moment, and I think my highest game has gone to about 300-ish turns or something like that. It's a hard game. Obviously, it ramps up. So you gain XP and research for completing not just combat, but also little random events. And so by completing these random events, you'll be awarded XP, sometimes lots of XP, and also sometimes research. And by doing these, you increase your little research timer, and then when that hits full, you can research something new. Now, research is split into 3 things. It's resources, craftable items, which includes everything you can craft, if it's passive items, weapons, armor, and also construction stuff like wells or walls or barracks and things like that, which is quite cool. Now, obviously, you need to jump around your map in order to get all these different resources to craft all these different things. But then, in order to craft all these different things, you're met with these random little charts, workbench basically. And what you can do is you can throw a few different things. You'll see I craft some various types of food for my village at some point in this video. And then you can sort of mix and match stuff together. And depending on what you mix and match together, you'll get different results. Obviously, some results will be better than others. Rarer resources will provide better stats. But sometimes, in the case of food, you simply want to create yourself lots of variations of food with the basic items that you have. Because if you then allow your villagers to eat multiple types of food, you have a list of bonuses. And if you have It goes from 1 to 10. So if you have 1 unique food, you get nothing. And that goes all the way to 10. So if you have 10 unique consumables for your villagers, you get these absolutely ludicrous passive bonuses, which, are rather handy. Now, there's just so much to cover in this game. This is the most bizarre game because it's indie, it's surprisingly good value for money, but the content and the mechanics and the systems, it's massive. Some of the systems are quite simple, like the crafting and the exploration and stuff like that, and some of them are not quite so simple, like the base stats and deciding how you're going to solve random events. Now, random events don't just come in the shape of combat, or indeed quests or anything like that. Some random events might be something in folklore, so some random spirit is roaming through your village, and if you say have a sage, you'll get your sage will have high intellect as a base stat, and you can then have an intellect option in order to solve this little random event. Or if you're when you first start the game and your focus is on warriors, you can use your attack to deal with this random ghost that's wandering through your village. Or if you have characters that have hunting as a passive stat, you can hunt it instead and have a higher chance of defeating this thing that is roaming through your village. Or you can, there's just so many different ways of solving all these random events, and it's not just combat. Although the way that the events are dealt with an intellect or strength or fighting or hunting, it's always through this card game. All events are dealt with via this little card game that they say is similar to Gwent, which is cool, which is an interesting way of dealing with things. But when your card game mechanic that you're using to deal with everything is an absolute ball ache for new users who have spent the best part of an entire afternoon on the game, it's probably not great for them not to enjoy themselves. So I've been using, again, as I said, a lot of the auto solution, just deal with it. And so basically I've been brute forcing everything pretty much up until this point. So if I send out an expedition party and I want to take everything, I'll just max it out with 4 warriors with lots of shield, lots of armor, and lots of damage. Send them off to kill them along with 1 or 2 gatherers so I can collect resources along the way and just auto-resolve everything. Some of the quests are a little bit more difficult than others. You'll see that enemies have various different types of skulls on them, and the number of skulls is basically how difficult they are to defeat. God, there is so much content in this game. I'm probably not going to be able to remember to describe all of it in this video. But yeah, the mobs will have different difficulties, and the scores don't change as you go through the level. Basically, you just build yourselves new armor, build yourself new shields, new weapons, and whatnot. Get yourself more and more characters so you can increase your expedition size, and basically take on enemies with a higher skull ranking. Now, obviously, the game, it does kind of kill you at some point. And more often than not, I've found that to be... I've been the cause of the end of the game as opposed to some random event. And so what usually happens is I will be quite deep into a game, I'll have gotten quite far, I'll be quite powerful at that point, and I'll be roaming around, and then suddenly my expedition, which I've spent lots of time and money and effort on, will suddenly get absolutely decimated by some random event. Now, this could be a 4-skull pack of orc invaders. This could be a random quest I've decided to do that just so happens to dump me in a situation where there's 4-skull. There is a 4-skull event, not necessarily combat, that I have to solve and then fail miserably, and then all of my guys get injured. Now, the way injuries work is you can... you'll get dealt damage, and that will persist, and you have to make camp or go back to your village to heal that damage. But if you get killed in the card game, or when you're auto-resolving, the character won't die. They'll be severely wounded, and they'll have a chance to just completely die the turn after or the turn after that if their wounds don't heal. Now, it seems like a bit of a 50-50 chance at this point, but obviously you can get healers as well as sages and all that crazy stuff, and visit healers in order to remove these wounds and prevent your guys from dying. So with that mechanic in mind, what happens is you get jumped on by this random event. Every single person in your expedition gets wounded. They all then proceed to die, and you end up with nothing but 3 gatherers and a crafter in your main village left over. And then they get invaded, they all get wounded, and you've only got one guy left, and at that point there's no point in carrying on. So I just create an expedition, send them off to die, and then end the game. And then I get the experience for the end of the game, and then start a new one. And I've actually found that I've started learning strategies, and you can actually approach this game however you like. So for the first game, I probably went all gathering and crafting, and that sort of I split myself too much. I think I made a couple of warriors, made a couple of crafters, made a couple of gatherers, and I had quite an even split between all of them. And so I was doing okay. I don't think I was progressing severely in any area particularly well, but then the second match, I thought, oh, hell with it, I'll go all out warrior. And so what I ended up doing is I just had 2 gatherers in the main base collecting basic wood and food. And then this massive exploration party who was literally just storming across the map and annihilating anything in sight. And the good thing about random events or attacking enemies is you'll get resources, not just XP or research. You'll get resources. Sometimes it's food, sometimes it's wood, sometimes it's random rare minerals that you might want to take back to your main village and dump there so someone can craft you some nice new armor and weapons for you to proceed to storm across the rest of the map. And that actually worked out quite entertaining, and it was a different way of doing things. And then after that, I tried the soldier approach again, but played a bit more of a passive role. And instead, this time, I focused on completing main quests instead of just sort of clearing the map of icons. Again, I probably got about the same distance, but then died of similar random event happens or your people die. So it's very quick that the game is very cruel, and it reminds you that it's a roguelike and not a full-on 4X when you get yourself very comfortable, which is probably quite good. I don't think... I think the idea is not for you to spend too long on a single match. Yes, enjoy yourself. Yes, expand. Yes, advance and do as much as you possibly can. But bear in mind that the purpose of this game is replayability. Is replaying what you've already encountered. Of course, everything is randomly generated. Everything is just randomly popped up everywhere. It's worth noting that in the first 6 hours of gameplay, I didn't come across a single event that was repeated. It wasn't until after the 6 hours I started the new game, and then suddenly the same sort of thing started cropping up. But even now, after 9-10 hours of playtime, I am actually finding that there are still some random events and random quests that are cropping up that I haven't seen before, which is quite cool. And because of the way you play the game differently each time, you'll often have different solutions available to you, and they'll provide different rewards or different failure rates. Or it's just very random and quite deeply developed, I think. Yeah, it's pretty complex. I wouldn't look at this and go, oh, this looks like Endless Legend or Civilization Beyond Earth but simplified, because it's not. Yes, in Endless Legend you can have multiple cities, and it's probably a little bit more in-depth crafting or whatever, but this is still pretty complex. I think a lot of people would be surprised how many potential gameplay hours there are in this game, and just how complicated it can get for those that want to do it. I mean, I'm playing on normal mode. There are modes that just shake everything up a hell of a lot more. So I have to say, this has really come out of nowhere, and I'm quite surprised at how deep the game is. Obviously, for some people, it still does match that casual need. You can play this game as just a pure gatherer and just gather yourself and advance and research and do stuff and still defend against enemies and get very, very, very far. And it has the same issue that Civilization has, in that it is just one more turn type of game. I have found myself playing it for a couple of hours, and then my partners come and go, oh, we need to go out shopping. Yeah, just one more turn. And I keep pressing that enter button, just one more turn. And it's as easy as that. You press the enter button, next turn, enter button, next turn. And so you'll find yourself playing this a lot longer than you originally intended. If anything, at the moment, early criticisms are just around the card game aspect. That doesn't seem to click with me right now. And after 10 hours... I think if it hasn't clicked by then, it probably never will. But the rest of the game is so deep, and there's so much for me to unlock, even after 10 hours worth of play. I can see myself getting drowned into this for a very, very long time. So that's the end of these short impressions. Obviously, next week on Thursday, we'll do the full review summary as well as the full written review. So join us next week for that. And yeah, until then, I'll see you guys next week.